God has given all of us a mission to make disciples here and everywhere for the glory of God.
Minus 10, 9.
We want our church to be a launch pad for sending people out on the mission God has for them. Regardless of who you are, we all have a role to play. We are all involved in God's story. We pray that the story shared through Mission Control will encourage you to see how God is calling you to be used by Him. Hello, my name is Amanda Levy, and I'm the Communications Director here at First Baptist Melbourne and the host of this podcast. Today we have Donna Flora joining us. Donna is currently serving in our apprenticeship under Aaron. Is Aaron your boss? Mm-hmm. Cool. With Launchpad, kind of working with missions and all things sending as she prepares for a new season. So I'm really excited to hear more about your story, hear kind of what's going on behind the scenes. Before we get into that, though, do our little fun space-themed icebreaker question we always do. And it's been a stretch what I've considered space, but I feel like I'm honing back in on space. So I hope we're there. So if you were stranded on a distant planet, like in a sci-fi movie, which movie character would you want as your sidekick?
Oh boy, which movie character would I want?
Right? And I would say the movie character doesn't have to be tied directly to a sci-fi movie. But bonus points if it is.
Okay, I am a big sci-fi fan to a large extent, so I would probably say either Luke Skywalker or Han Solo.
Okay.
So
why?
Because they have the Force and they can protect you, and they fight for the good side, and
that's fair.
They have lightsabers.
I feel like within this realm of Star Wars, like a Yoda sidekick could also be very...
That's true.
They also have the Force. They have like this knowing sense of them. But it is nice to have the protection element of the others as well.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a fun little one. But as much fun as it is to talk about outer space, thought we could talk a little bit about your space. So I know that this is a little bit of a trickier question to answer, but where does God currently have you on mission in your life right now?
So as you mentioned, I'm currently in the apprentice program, working with Aaron still, trying to just help him and Melissa however I can. When I took the Missions 101 class, I guess it was last year in the spring.
Okay.
And he was talking about all the plans for all the different mission trips and everything that were going to be coming up he was trying to do. And I thought, you guys could use some help with all of this going on. It's not, it's just the two of you, and maybe I can help in that area.
Yeah.
So I said, hey, can I help? And Aaron went and talked to all the different people and said, let's bring you on board as an apprentice.
Okay. So where did you how did God lead you to that point? And where are you kind of in your life to allow you the time?
So about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, I guess, during the pandemic, I started considering the possibility of retiring early.
Okay.
And during that process, discovered that I could retire early, and then decided, okay, Lord, I'm not just going to sit around and play pickleball all day. So what do you want me to do for you? So I started reading a couple of books and praying a lot about, where God wanted me to serve him. And started looking into a number of different things. I tried becoming a mentor with the women's ministry, and that didn't pan out. My mentee never called me back.
Oh, no.
Thought, okay, well, I like doing financial stuff, so I actually became certified as a financial coach. And
did you work in finances, the job you retired from?
I do not.
Okay.
Yeah. And I am currently still working. I just work part-time.
Okay.
But I do not. It was something I had considered at one point in time, but I do not. But I've been very blessed and done a lot of research and reading and just investing on my own and such. So I got certified as a financial coach and talked with Pastor Dennis, and we scheduled a Financial Peace University class here that I was going to lead.
Okay.
And one person signed up.
Oh.
And you need at least 3 to do it. So I was like, okay, well, that didn't pan out.
Yeah.
So then I signed up for Florida Baptist Disaster Response.
Okay.
Got certified for that. And the 2 call-outs that there have been, I was unable to participate in either one of them because of work commitments. So I was like, okay, Lord, everything I'm trying is just falling apart. You know,
Yeah,
it's just the doors are closing. So where do you want me to serve? Well, during this whole process, I came in and I talked to Pastor Dennis and said, hey, I'm getting ready to retire. Any ideas or suggestions as to, what I should, consider doing?
Mm-hmm.
He looked straight at me and he said, the IMB is looking for people like you. And I was like, who are you talking to? Because no. IMB is not something that's been on my radar ever.
Uh-huh.
But through a series of events, I am currently in the process of applying for an IMB role.
Okay. And the IMB International Mission Board, if you're not aware. So what was your work that you retired from then? What kind of was the industry in which you lived and played and worked?
So I've been in the engineering industry for the last 30 years.
Ah, okay. That makes sense for the area. Okay.
Yeah, systems engineering and then mainly project management type work. And that was particularly the area that Dennis was keying off of that said that the IMB could utilize project management type people.
Yeah, for sure. So have you been at First Baptist Melbourne for a while then?
Only about 5 years or so.
Oh, okay. Okay. So
I've been familiar with it. My dad used to go here before he passed away.
Okay.
And that's how I actually knew Pastor Dennis was just through my dad. And then when I finally got old enough to qualify for the seniors ministry, I started participating with some of those events.
Nice. I think what's cool about your story so far is I think a lot of people, when they try the first thing and it fails, seemingly in our definition of failure fails, and you're like, okay, you try another one and then that doesn't go as planned. It'd be very easy to just like, oh, well, I tried something, throw in the towel. So I think it's cool that you've continued to persist. So Dennis mentions IMB. What was your next step from there? Where'd you kind of go?
I stalled for a long time. So it's been 2 years actually since he first suggested that to me.
Okay.
And because I was very, very hesitant to the idea and thinking, that was when I started pursuing some of these other things. But God,
so he planted that idea before you hit these dead ends.
Yes, he had planted that idea back 2 years ago.
Okay.
So yeah, in my this is not for me. I started trying all these other things first, but God was faithful and dropped little hints along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Jenna Cobb asked our Sunday school class if we would help out with a group that we brought in from the IMB for a seminar training session that they were having here.
Okay.
And because I was working part-time, I was like, sure, I'll help out.
Mm-hmm.
And ended up picking up our family at the Orlando airport and driving them over here. And on the conversation home from there to here, discovered that he had a background very similar to mine.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, Lord. So that was one little hint. And then just working with, was trying to go after the Missions 101, was trying to go on mission trip and volunteered for the Prague mission trip last year and went to the info meeting and everything and found out there that the IMB missionary that we were going to be supporting is, of course, Amy's sister and her husband, who is an IMB logistics missionary.
Yes, we've had them on the podcast.
Yes, and that was the role specifically that Dennis had mentioned for me as a logistics role. And I'm like, okay, Lord, so this is interesting. So started poking around a little more on the IMB website and everything. Fast forward to this year in March when Pastor Aaron got an email about a senders conference that the IMB was going to be hosting. And he couldn't go, and Pastor Mike couldn't go. So he's like, hey, Donna, do you want to go? I'm like, sure, why not?
Yeah.
So I get there, and there are like logistics people everywhere I turn around.
You just can't get away from them.
Couldn't get away from them. And then the huge in-your-face, God hint was they were doing what they call FPO, which is their field. Of course, now I can't think of the name of it.
So many acronyms.
Yeah, FPO. It's their field training,
Gotcha.
field personnel orientation. That's
okay.
Process right before the end. They were there, and come to find out, one of the folks there was a 72-year-old retired widowed female who was getting ready to go out on the field in a logistics role. I was like, okay, God, I can't say no anymore. This is obviously you've been laying this path out for me.
Yeah.
It's time for me to finally be obedient and
Yeah.
apply. So had a couple of people else there say, just apply, just apply, just apply. So I applied in mid-March, right after I got home, and have been working through the process since then.
Had you ever been on an international mission trip prior to this?
I had been on one.
Okay.
Back in 2007. I had gone with a church that I was with at the time to the Ukraine. That was a trip where we were mainly focusing on working with orphanages. And that's an area that's been near and dear to my heart over the years.
Gotcha.
So that was the only international mission trip I've ever been on.
Okay. So would you have suspected at any point leading up to prior Dennis says the INB would be interested in people like you? Had you ever considered any sort of pathway like this?
Never.
No.
Never. I'm an introvert. I'm not a big, bold, outspoken person, and that's always been the image that's been in my head of a missionary is you're going out and you're evangelizing people and such.
Yes.
And I'm like, I'm more of a behind the scenes kind of a gal.
Yeah.
So when he mentioned logistics, I was like, I didn't even know they needed people like that.
Yeah.
So it's been a really cool thing to discover what all they can use. And that's one of the things as I've been looking through this process. They're not just your traditional people, but our traditional skill sets, but videographers, audio people, people who like playing sports, medical field, of course, obviously, and other things. Just about any skill set that you have, the IMB can use it on the field.
That's awesome. So how far into the process are you with the IMB right now?
So the first phase is a very short phase. It's the self-assessment, and then you have to have someone on the staff of your church fill out an assessment. And as long as both of those, look like their thumbs up, then you can move on to the next phase.
Okay.
So I had Pastor Dennis actually did that assessment for me.
I mean, I would hope he would, since he was the one that was like, you should consider this.
Yes. So then from there, they have what they call the development phase.
Okay.
And so then you get assigned a number of different tasks that you have to complete based on your assessment as to what you need to complete. Also, a part of that is because it is an international mission and they're going to provide health coverage and all of that and everything. There's also a medical component to it.
Gotcha.
So I'm actually in that process at the moment, trying to finish off all of these tasks and then trying to get all the medical clearances that are needed before I go.
Gotcha.
So then from there, once that happens, it moves into I guess it's the field assessment phase, where all of your paperwork is reviewed by the IMB staff. They then say, yes, you're ready to move forward, or no, there may be a little bit more stuff you need to work on. But once you get the thumbs up to move forward, then you can do what they call as job match. So during the time that you're working on all of your development tasks, you have access to the jobs that are available.
Gotcha.
And you can review them. So that's kind of exciting because you can kind of see what the opportunities are that you can potentially apply for.
The possible opportunities.
Right.
Start to kind of dream and visualize.
Right, exactly. So once you get there, you can they ask you to apply to, I think, 3. And then you interview with the different team leads that you would be working with. And then when you get matched, then you can move on to the next phase. Now, this is for their midterm folks, which is the FPO, and then getting ready to go overseas.
So are you looking at a midterm? How long of a term thing are you looking at?
So right now, they have a number of different paths. The path that I'm looking at going through is called the International Service Corps, and it is specifically geared towards people who are retirees looking to spend a few years on the field helping out. And that's a 2 to 3 year commitment, depending on what the job is that you end up taking.
Okay, cool. Do you have family? What does your family think about all of this?
So yes, I have 6 children.
Okay.
Most of them are okay, Mom, go for it. You know, we're excited for you. I've got one who's like, Mom, I still want my mom,
Yeah.
So they're younger. The youngest one is 20. The oldest one is 27.
Okay.
And so she's like,
man, you had 6 kids really close then.
Well, I say I cheated.
Okay.
3 of them are biological and 3 of them are adopted.
Okay.
So she's like, hey, I don't want my mom to leave. I want her to be available if I need her and such.
Sure.
And I'm like, well, honey, there's the internet and there's
The technology is
FaceTime
a
and,
wonderful thing.
there's all of that. So I'm praying that she'll come around. And the reality is God's called me to do this. So
Yeah.
I'm going anyway.
Are they in this area or are they kind of spread out, your kids?
They're a little spread out. I've got one in Miami,
Okay.
one in West Palm.
Okay.
Currently 3 are here.
Uh-huh.
One of them, my youngest, is actually getting ready to go to UCF
Okay.
shortly. So she'll be in Orlando. And then my daughter, who's currently in Jacksonville, is actually planning on moving to Maryland
Oh, okay.
before the end of the summer.
Okay.
So,
That kind of spread.
yep.
Has it made it difficult not having all of your kids be so excited about it, or are you super confident it doesn't even affect you?
Oh, gosh. When she first told me that and started, asking, she was like, well, does my opinion matter? I'm like, yes and no.
Yeah.
And she's like, is this a done deal? I'm like, well, not yet, but pretty much.
Yeah.
And then I think the statement that really hit home the most was, it feels like you love God more than you love me. And I'm like, yeah.
It's as a mom, that's such a hard teaching moment. And it would be difficult to be like, well, yeah, I do have to follow this, and I'm not forsaking you. So what is it like being on the field for 2 to 3 years? Like, are you there the whole 2 to 3 years?
I will be there the whole 2 to 3 years.
Uh-huh.
Now, apparently, there will be opportunities to come home.
Mm-hmm.
I think you get 4 weeks of vacation
Okay.
per year. So
Finances
I'll
are
figure,
a thing, though.
I'll figure all of that out as time goes. This has been one of the other interesting ways God has been stretching me.
Uh-huh.
Is I like to have a plan. I like to know exactly what's happening and what's going on.
Sure.
That's that planner in me.
Sure.
And I'm just like, okay, Lord, whatever. I'm just doing the next thing you've asked me to do at this point. And I'm just trusting you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a stretch.
Mm-hmm. And you're going on a mission trip soon.
Yes.
So is this, you had one scheduled for Prague that was canceled.
Right.
Is this your first mission trip since kind of saying yes to all of this?
Yes, it is.
Okay. How are you feeling about all of that?
So I'm excited about that. Again, it's a bit of a stretch because the primary focus of the trip is evangelism,
Mm-hmm.
and that's generally not my thing.
Uh-huh.
Like I said, I don't just walk up to people and talk to them, but at least for this one, the way it's structured is they have kind of things already set up in place for us. We'll be going into people's homes and
okay.
talking to them.
Okay.
I would say one-on-one, but from what I've been told, when you get to the house, basically they invite like all their friends and neighbors to come, and you end up talking to a larger group.
But it's kind of like you've been invited here.
Yes.
Rather than a cold call.
Exactly.
Walking up to someone on the street.
Exactly.
Okay. How did you get connected to this mission trip?
So I am in the Explorers class on
Okay.
Sunday mornings, and Ted and Donna Badger, who are the leaders of this mission trip,
Mm-hmm.
Donna came up to me and asked, she said, I'd like you to pray about going on this trip with us. And I kind of looked right at her and I said, I don't have to pray about it. I've been trying to go on a mission trip for more than a year now, and both ones that I've tried to go on have been canceled. So to me, this is God saying,
Here
here's
you
where
go.
you need to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. I feel like your story is very abnormal, but it's in a really cool way. Like, okay, I worked in this industry as an engineer, thought about retiring early. What can I do? Oh, let me just completely pivot and go in this direction.
It has been such a different change of what I would have ever dreamed.
Like, all of these years leading up to it, has there been any other experience like this of God completely throwing something out of left field at you that's prepared you for this?
Okay, well, kind of yes and kind of no.
Okay.
So, as I mentioned, I have 6 children. I have 3 biological and 3 adopted. So, my 3 children are adopted from China.
Okay.
So, when we first got married, we were open to the option of possibility of adoption at the time.
Okay.
But fortunately, we're able to, get pregnant without much difficulty.
Sure.
But then once I had my daughter, we decided that we wanted to try adopting and to give her a sibling.
Okay.
So ended up going through the process and ended up choosing China. So we went to China, brought home my daughter, who was 2.5 at the time.
Okay.
During that process, had my eyes opened to just what a huge need there was over there, and not just for girls, which is what everybody always assumes, but they actually have a large number of boys that are available. So I knew God told me when we came back that we would be going back at some point in time. At the time, my husband wasn't quite ready.
Gotcha.
So 5 years later, we did start the process again to go back, and this time for a boy.
Okay.
And during that process, come to find out about a young man who was getting ready to age out of adoption.
Oh, okay.
So in China, the day you turn 14, you're no longer eligible for international adoption.
Wow.
So started out advocating for him, trying to find a family for him. And long story short, God basically said, you're the family.
Stop looking for other people.
Yes. So bringing home 2 at a time. They were both older, so the one that we were in process for was 10.
Okay.
Ben obviously was coming up on 14.
And how old was your daughter, your biological daughter, at this point?
So at that point, Sarah was 8.
Okay, so Sarah and your other daughter that you had adopted would have been
Hannah.
younger than...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, in fact, we broke a lot of the rules.
I think rules are meant to be broke. So we've also adopted. So I'm pretty familiar with all of the adoption things. So
Yeah.
Yes.
So we brought home 2 at once that were not biologically related.
Uh-huh.
Ben
disrupted the birth order.
We disrupted the birth order on both sides. So Ben is older than any of my biological children.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, actually, I called it plugging the gap because he's younger than the biological son, but older than my biological daughter.
Okay.
So, yeah, we broke a lot of the rules. But, I mean, there were just so many cool God stories during that whole process.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was one of the ones where he kind of threw me a curveball and said, hey, bring home this 14-year-old boy.
Bring home two that aren't sibling sets. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wild. How did God work through all that? At that point, then, I'm trying to think through your timeline. So you adopted the first. Your husband wasn't ready to adopt again. You felt like adoption was going to be in the future. Yeah. Was God faithful to kind of ease that peace for your husband?
Yes. Yeah. So it was 5 years after we brought her home that we started the process again.
Okay.
And at that point, when I mentioned it, I felt like I'd been listening to David Platt online, and he'd preached a sermon when he was actually doing his Radical series. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, God, I really feel like this is where you're calling. This is what you want me to do right now.
Yeah.
So I talked to my husband, and he went off and prayed about it and came back and said, yeah, let's start the process. Mm-hmm. Well, then when it came time to add Ben into the mix, that was huge. So I was like, this is
more than what we originally...
Well beyond,
yeah.
Right. So a lot of prayer on my part, a lot of prayer on his part, but he finally said, okay, yes, I think this is what God's calling us to do right now.
Okay.
So,
if you don't mind me asking, where... I don't know how to delicately ask this. Where's your husband now?
So I'm divorced.
Okay.
So through the process of bringing the boys home, one of them ended up being diagnosed with some mental health issues.
Gotcha.
That put some serious strains on the marriage.
Sure.
And unfortunately, the marriage ended up in divorce.
Sure.
So that was 5 years ago.
Sure. Okay, so this is recent. So not that long after were you trying to figure out, how can I retire early? I feel like I'm in this new position in life. And God just kind of was faithful to say, here. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That he was able to navigate all of that. Are you nervous about this radical shift in the direction of your life?
So I go from times of thinking, okay, I've got this, to being scared completely out of my wits.
That's a good place to be.
So, yeah, it's nerve-wracking at times to think that I'm going to basically get up and leave everything I know.
Yeah.
Go to a country I've most likely never been to before. I've traveled a little bit internationally, but not extensively, and have to adapt to the culture and a new job and all of that. So, yeah, that's a little bit intimidating.
I know you don't know this answer for sure, but what timeline do you think you're looking at for how much longer you'll be here?
So right now, what they're thinking is that I will probably go to Richmond, which is where the IMB headquarters are, in probably January for the FPO, the Field Personnel Orientation.
Okay.
And then that's a 7-week process.
Okay.
Would end up sometime March-ish, I guess. And then most likely would head over wherever I'm going around April of next year. So about a year from now.
Okay. That's cool. What advice do you have for someone who feels like they're in the shoes you were in 2 to 3 years ago, and maybe they're like floundering a little bit and they don't know where to go or what to do?
So the typical
Easy question.
the typical things I would say. First of all, pray.
Mm-hmm.
Pray and ask God to show you, because He will be faithful and show you what the next step is.
Mm-hmm.
Second, I would say reach out to godly people around you for some advice and input, just like I reached out and asked Dennis. The other thing I did was did a lot of reading. So I was reading a number of books, but one that particularly struck me was called The Retirement Reformation by Bruce Bruinsma.
Okay.
And it talks a lot about serving God during your third phase of life, rather than doing the typical, golfing all the time or, traveling all the time. And I might get to travel. It's just this time somebody's going to pay me to do it.
Yeah.
So
was retirement something that was always in your mind of an end goal, or was it kind of well, now that I'm here and I'm close, maybe I'll try and pursue it?
So when I was much younger, I had dreams of retiring early.
Okay.
Didn't know if that would pan out, but God has been faithful and has blessed me financially in such a way that I am able to retire early.
Sure.
So, decided
then I would say
that was something I'd always looked forward to. And my plan when I retired was to get in an RV and travel the U.S. and just visit. I love state parks. I love national parks and stuff. So that was part of the motivation for checking out the Florida Baptist Disaster Response. I'm like,
because you're like, this could fit into that box.
Yeah, this could fit into that box. And God went, no, that's not what I have for you.
I think it's interesting, though, how you can see little seeds planted as you look back. 'Cause you miss them in the moment. But as you look back, you can see little seeds of like, well, God put this in your heart. And maybe it's not for what you thought. So you had this desire to retire fairly early. And then it's like, because God had this for you.
Right.
And so I think it's cool how He kind of can guide you and prepare you for things.
I mean, one of the other things along those lines was, of course, doing international missions, you have to do missions cross-culturally. And looking back, it's like...
He prepared you for that.
Adopting from China. I mean, how more cross-cultural can you get from bringing 3 kids from a completely different culture into your home, and particularly even older kids, and getting used to that. And then also looking back at my career, one of the things when I was filling out for the application process for IMB was like, what type of cross-cultural experiences you've had. And I started thinking about all the different people I've worked with over the years. I started listing the countries, and there must have been 15 different countries.
Oh, wow.
Of people I've worked with.
I'm assuming you were working as an engineer here locally with like defense type stuff?
So I did do a few years at defense with there, but I've been mainly in the commercial sector.
Oh, okay.
So...
That's cool. See, there's just even more examples how God can be preparing for you for something that when it hits you feels like a complete left field. And it's like, no. I've been putting little things here along the path this whole way. And it helps give I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm assuming it helps give a little bit of confidence and assurance that He will continue to put the path before you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, kind of wrapping up here a little bit then, what advice would you have for someone who is seeking to answer that call to make disciples and kind of seeking to live that out in their life?
I would say take the next step. Whatever you think that next step is, whether it's, doing more discipleship classes, taking a leadership class, doing more exploration, going on a mission trip, whatever you think that next step is towards that goal that you think God's calling you to, go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
And God will be faithful and show you the next step after that.
Yeah, I think even using your story, you take that step, and even if the next step towards that path is closed, you still have another next step you can take.
Right.
So it's constantly looking for that. How did you even find the missions one-on-one class thing?
So I took Discover.
Okay.
And then,
Another plug for Discover
Yes.
Workshop.
So I took the Discover Workshop, and then Aaron talked about it in there, and I was like, okay, I'll go take this. Because just looking at what my life map was and what everything was, it's like, okay, let's see what this has
Okay.
available.
So if you're listening to this or watching this and you're like, what in the world is the Discover Workshop? You've done it now. Can you share a little bit about the Discover Workshop?
Oh gosh. Yes. So
Just pull it out of the
I was going to say,
recesses
it's
of
been
your
a
brain.
while. So basically you sit down with a couple of the pastors, and they go through a lot of different things about what your life background is, what some of your life path is, what your skills are. We took the DISC.
Yeah, the DISC profile.
DISC
it's
profile.
a personality test.
Personality profile, and then they have you take the spiritual gifts test and kind of figure out between your personality profile, your spiritual gifts, and what your passions are, and figure out where all that melds together, and then find out where God wants you to plug in serving Him.
And they even have kind of lay out some paths before you within the First Baptist Melbourne ecosystem. That's not the word I was looking for, but yeah, because I think with a big church sometimes it can feel a little scary. You're like, I don't know, there's lots of people here, where do I plug in? So I think it's cool. Discover Workshop. It's a great place to plug in.
Yes, it was.
Well, thanks for coming in and joining us today. I enjoyed our conversation, and I hope that the rest of all of your assessments go well, and I look forward to hearing a year from now where God's sending you out and all the lessons you've learned in the process.
I'm excited too. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mission Control. If you're interested in learning more about Launch 10X and the different ways to get involved in what God is doing here at First Baptist Melbourne, a great place to start would be visiting our website, launchme.church. Next time on Mission Control, we have Abigail Douglas joining us. Abby works with me on our communications team. She actually started as my intern last spring. Abby helps with a bunch of the administrative stuff behind the scenes with the podcast, including helping with the scheduling of all of our guests. I had a placeholder on the schedule for someone who has interned, hoping maybe she would, get the hint and come on and share some of her story of reaching out and interning with us. I'm thrilled that she said yes, and I can't wait for you to hear how God is stirring amongst the young adults in our church. Until then, have a great week on mission with King Jesus.